Amen. Right on. Okay, I'm Jack. I'm an alcoholic.
Jack.
Great to be with everybody. And it's been an awesome time so far. This should be really fun and really cool. And it's a wonderful, wonderful looking panel. So there's like 50 or 60 cards in here.
Oh my goodness.
And we have about an hour, less than an hour. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull some. We're going to go with giving somebody the first answer, asking someone to start. And then if you want to elaborate, if somebody else wants to say something too, we can pass the microphone, or we can just do everybody gets one and go that way. However it starts to unfold, that's how we're going to do it. We're going to trust and let it rock, but keep an eye and thought about how much time we're using for the answer, because we got 50 and we only got an hour or less. Bill did say, just for the record, that he was out of the way. Bill is back now.
You guys are done. Thank you. It was wonderful. All I was going to suggest is that everyone identify themselves, pass the mic down through in your sobriety or your Al-Anon date, if you have one, please. Now I'm out of the way.
Is it on? Oh, it's on. Yeah, I'm Dane. I'm an alcoholic.
Suzanne, alcoholic.
I'm Cleo. I'm an alcoholic.
Hi, Cleo.
I'm Rhonda, Al-Anon.
Sandy, Al-Anon.
Celeste, Al-Anon.
Okay. We're going right in. I'm not going to read that question, but the man who wrote it is hilarious. Okay, so let's start with this one. What does going to any length mean to you? We're going to ask Suzanne to kick this panel off.
For that, thanks, Jack.
Sure.
Suzanne, alcoholic. Yeah, this is a pretty uncomfortable question for a newcomer. I see a lot of looks of, like stricken, panic on people's faces. But I think when I first heard this question, I was just like, whatever. I was so desperate. And so I spent a lot of years in untreated alcoholism, and I got to know what, like, not going to any lengths to stay sober was all about. And so when I finally was, like, ready to stop reading the steps on the wall and do the steps on the wall, I was absolutely ready to do anything that lady told me to. I'd seen her at meetings. I didn't know her. But there was something that touched me inside that said, you can trust this woman and you can do whatever she tells you. And I did. And today, I have to say, I have had the same sponsor for 22 years. And I don't do everything she tells me to do. I do not do everything she tells me to do, and that's okay. And, God gave me a brain to use, right? So I don't know if that answers the question, but maybe someone else has something they want to add.
Somebody else want to go, or you want me to pick again? Because we got choices.
Pick again.
That is one woman that I listen to very intently. What is spiritual consent, and when do you need it? Rhonda J.
Spiritual consent is when I want to talk about something that happened in Sandy's life. I need her permission before I talk about her or anybody else. I don't want to tell anybody else's story without their consent.
Gonna keep it with the Al-Anon theme. For Al-Anon, how does your experience with the 12 steps in Al-Anon compare or contrast to the experiences shared this weekend? Sandy?
Well, I'm Sandy. How does my experience with the 12 steps? Oh, sorry, thank you. Gee, I'm thinking about how to answer this question. All I know is before I came to Al-Anon, I didn't know what was wrong with my life. I didn't know why I was depressed. I didn't know why everything sucked. I didn't know why my family was a mess. I was clueless. I didn't even realize it was unmanageable, which was really ridiculous. So working the 12 steps has just been a life-saving experience because I was at the point where I was suicidal. Anyway, so the 12 steps are definitely a gift, and I eternally thank AA for the 12 steps and also for saving my daughter's life, who's in Alcoholics Anonymous. So hopefully that answers the question.
I'd like to add, actually, that's a very good question. I think in my experience, working the 12 steps in Al-Anon, when I think I shared this last night, was, it was a place to go to the Al-Anon meetings. We read all of the literature, and I probably have been oversaid many times, but I never left with any solution. I left still angry, and I still left delusional that I could stop all of the addiction in my family. That I thought that if I just keep coming to meetings and just sharing my story, that's all I need to do. And it wasn't until I started the big book discussion of, what exactly does it mean when I'm powerless? I'm not looking for that one thing that's going to stop and make everything okay, and leave still angry and sad and all of it until I started working with the big book and the 12 steps, and acquired a spiritual side of me that I didn't know I had. I grew up Catholic, I went to church, but there was no connection. And I can't say enough how much the difference between working the steps in Al-Anon versus AA. So thanks.
Thank you.
And I just want to add real quick, this weekend, we have the same disease that the alcoholics have. We just don't have an allergy to alcohol. We have the same obsessive mind, and we have the same spiritual sickness. So for me, listening to these guys talking this weekend, if I substitute my obsessive habits, my drug of choice, which wasn't alcohol or drugs, it fits me perfect. So for me to come to a weekend like this, even though it is AA, is like getting a jolt of spirituality for me as well.
Thank you all very much. It's awesome. Still trying to figure out how we all this is where we end up. We end up hanging out with, this is what we're doing. These are the people that we're with that we get to hear experiences from. It's incredible. Just incredible. Mrs. Devlin.
Yes, sir.
The phrase, faith without works is dead, is found in the big book several times. What does this mean to you? How do you put this into practice? Would you like the card?
I don't think I need the card. Thank you, though. I'm Cleo. I'm an alcoholic. What this phrase means to me, there's a big difference between talking about something and actually doing it. If I've really made this third step decision and turn my life over and it's no longer mine, and I have faith that God is the only possible solution for the predicament that I am in, what am I willing to do to access that solution? Am I just going to make a list of people that I've harmed and then, as was talked about, edit the list and decide for myself that I don't need to make these amends, or, not go out and see the people that I'm afraid to see? Or am I going to put it into action? For me, it's like I haven't accessed power just by believing there is a power. I actually have to take steps and put one foot in front of the other, get in the car, show up, make amends, sponsor women. I need to actually put in some work. Otherwise, just getting on my knees and praying in the morning, that isn't that faith. If I have faith that there is a power there, but I'm not doing anything to access it, it's a dead faith. I can say that I believe that God will change me all day long, but if I'm not putting in the work, nothing's going to happen.
Anybody else? That's how I feel too. Rhonda, you want to go? Okay.
I just wanted to say real quick, for me, people that study the big book, that study the steps to get the relief that it offers without carrying the message to other people, to me, that's faith without works, and it's dead. Because we can't stay emotionally sober or physically sober if we're not carrying the message to others and living this lifestyle. It doesn't mean anything to know it if we're not living it.
Whammy. This is awesome, and I love you all. Okay, this question, someone must have heard that you were going to be on this panel because your first name is on the card, and it says, I don't think it was him. It says, Dane, what was your greatest amends? ? Can you tell us about your spiritual experience?
You said we got a minute, huh?
You got 3.
I've had a lot of great amends experiences, a lot of them. But as I've come to know, hitting the toughest one first, everything else rolls downhill after that. I get to really experience the power of God working in my life. And I honestly believe that's when my third step comes to fruition, when I'm standing on the threshold of that individual who would be the last person I ever wanted to see. And I'm standing on that threshold and my knees are knocking and my teeth are chattering. And I'm about to see that individual face to face. And I'm blessed to have that time and try to right the wrongs. And I think one of my toughest ones, but it was also incredibly powerful, was, way back in the day, I worked in the refuse industry. And, these folks were pretty well connected. And, the guy who owned the business, I can't say that the business was totally illegal, we'll put it that way. But, and I loved the guy, I loved the environment, I loved the atmosphere. I got to do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it, but I was extremely loyal to him, except for when it came to stealing time, stealing material, stealing money. There was a whole lot of circumstances and there was a whole lot of wrongs that I did. This guy, he kind of had the attitude if, somebody was kind of going wayward away from the crew, that we'd all go out to dinner and he would publicly straighten them out. And I sat at a dinner table, where he took a dinner fork and jammed it through this guy's hand and pinned him to the table and forced an apology out of him. So he wasn't someone I was really excited to see, now that I was sober. And he granted me the time and I went to see him. And, knowing that there had been some people probably in his past that were neutralized because they trespassed him. And I had to sit down and tell him, that I stole money from you. I stole money out of the office. I stole a lot of time, from you. I had a little business going on the side. And he looked at me across the table, and I was terrified. I was terrified to talk to this guy, and he looked at me across the table, and he said, the best thing that I could ever hope for you, because I really thought of you as a son, because you were so loyal to me, and I knew you were so screwed up when it came to the dry goods and when the booze. He said, my biggest hope is the realization that you'd get sober. And here you are sitting across the table and telling me what you did that I already knew you did to me. And I thought that might be the end of it. It was 4 or 5 years later, he called me, and he asked me if I could go sit with his niece, who had a problem, and he wanted to know if I was still in this A&A. And I said, I'm still in this A&A, and I'll go sit with her. And she never got sober, but he gave me the opportunity, to do that. And so, I mean, one experience after another, and I think we've all had them. But that's one out of a whole list. Thanks.
Thank you. Okay. Yeah. If I am an alcoholic living in the principles based on the 36 spiritual principles outlined in this book of Alcoholics Anonymous, so this is assuming you're an alcoholic that's gotten better, that is sober now, living in all the principles, why do I need to go to Al-Anon if I live with an active alcoholic? And I would say whoever feels qualified to answer, because God knows I'm slightly confused.
I believe that if you're an alcoholic and you're working out of the principles of the big book, I don't believe that you need to go to Al-Anon. I also believe that there's a lot of people out there that think that we offer a different perspective. And if that's the case, then by all means come to Al-Anon. I don't think it's a necessity, but I definitely think that we can just offer a different perspective because we're not alcoholics, but we love alcoholics and we know how to help you to be able to love your alcoholic and separate the two, the alcoholism and the person.
That's very well put, I think.
I've had that question myself, that's why. Sorry.
Any alcoholics with an experience or an opinion? I mean,
Suzanne, alcoholic, I have had that question myself because I've been to Al-Anon over the years, on and off, and I am in Alcoholics Anonymous and practice I don't know if I practice all 36, but I'm a pretty good AA member, I think, in my opinion. But I have a lot of sick people in my life, and I also have a lot of people in my life that are AA and Al-Anon, or just Al-Anon. So I don't know, but thank you for that answer because I have struggled with that question myself. And as some of the people on the panel know, I show up in Al-Anon occasionally when when stuff hits the fan in my life with the people that I love. So yeah, good question.
I'll just say briefly, I have very little experience with this, but I'm only speaking from the experience that I do have, which is when I first got sober this time, my boyfriend, who I was with for 3 years and living with, and we had plans to, build a life together, he relapsed a couple months into my sobriety. And I did not, it was suggested to me that I check out Al-Anon. I did check out a couple meetings, but my experience was that working the steps in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous and continuing to practice those principles was more than sufficient to get through the next year with him and not drink myself. And it was painful, but I found what I needed in Alcoholics Anonymous.
I was like, how could I feel like I wanted to cry? I'm just reading questions. Okay, so I'm gonna ask a question that looks like this handwriting's awesome. just for the record. How do you know when it is time to, quote, create space between yourself and someone negative in your life? Question mark. When do you stop trying to help? Question mark. And I'm going to get wild and throw the question wherever it wants to go, but I was thinking that way too.
That's a loaded question.
Can you repeat the question?
I can. Yep. Another nod to the handwriting. How do you know when it is time to create space between yourself and someone negative in your life? When do you stop trying to help?
Well, I guess it depends. Number one, do you have a program? You know, if you work in the 12 steps, we don't like to help people that can help themselves. Number one, if you need a ride because you don't have a car and you need a ride to the doctor, is different than you need a ride to a party or something like that. So I think it's important for us to be able to differentiate whether there's a legitimate need or if we're just helping someone to help them, but I think that it's important to work a program so that you can differentiate the difference between helping someone and enabling someone. Because if we do for that person what they can do for themselves and are just choosing not to, they're never going to get better. They're never going to hit their bottom,
Hi, I'm Sandy.
Hey, Sandy.
So I was thinking what it is detachment. I can detach from the negativity but still love the person. And how would I do that? I mean, there's been times when I've done what's called bookending, where I was going to be with my family of origin, which was lots of alcoholics and addicts, but I love my family and I wanted to spend a holiday with them, so I'd, call somebody before, call somebody after. Maybe I'd go to a meeting before and after, because that was what I needed to do to maintain my sanity in a difficult situation. But you can still love the person. I know my former sponsor had a sister who was an active alcoholic, and her sister would always call and complain and bitch and gossip about everybody. So her sponsor told her that when she called and started, she should find some reason to get off the phone. Somebody's at the door, It was interesting how the negativity diminished over time as she stopped getting involved in the negative discussions. So just maybe a helpful hint.
Yeah. Well, I think for me, in my experience, I would just, again, it comes back to working the steps and, your connection with your higher power. And, how is it that you do that when there's relationships in your life that don't quite go the way you want? And what does that mean? Does that mean you want them to behave the way you want? So that's control. And so what do we know about control? Well, there's a big book about that too. So it's, I think that's really what it comes back to. It's, when they say work the program, that means work the program. Get someone that works with you, that you connect with, and connect so that you're working the steps together and bringing the God into it, really. So, thanks.
You guys are crushing this. Thank you very, very much. Let me bring that mic all the way back down here and see what happens. How do I begin to seek that which I have no clue about? Chaotic energy keeping me from dealing with something. It's keeping me from my home.
Can I see that card?
You can see that card.
How do I begin to seek that which I have no clue about? If you got some willingness to no longer be whatever you are, and if something is moving you to action, take the action. come to some place like this, go to a meeting, sit and listen to somebody, find some guidance, create energy keeping me from
chaotic energy.
read that for me, will you?
Chaotic energy keeping me from dealing with something. It's keeping me from my home.
Chaotic energy is keeping me from dealing with something. It's keeping me from my home. Get a sponsor and talk about it.
Anybody else want to take a shot at that?
I just think about powerlessness, and when I'm in a dilemma like that, I just always take it back to my powerlessness. And I am small, and God is huge. And I don't know what God is. I've been seeking God for 56 years, and I couldn't give you a definition of who my God is. And I want it that way, and yet I want to be able to sit across from somebody and say, this is God, this is the higher power, like grab it now. So I think if I have my eyes open and I'm willing to see God anywhere, I will see God anywhere. You know, I will see God in the fireflies that are out there right now. I will see God in these squares on the ceiling, and, you know, like, who put these squares on the ceiling? Like, I'm just in awe of these squares on the ceiling. And, you know, if I remain in a place, and I get the chaotic energy, man, I get it. But deep down within every one of us is the idea of God. And I have to believe that's true. I have to believe that's true. I don't always feel like it's true, but I have to keep coming back to I am powerless and God is the power.
Thanks. I do a lot with two-way prayer. And every morning, you know, as soon as I wake up and I start my morning session, I have a journal. And I write down everything that comes to my mind as I'm in my prayer session. And that's what I would suggest for this person, is to connect with God doing two-way prayer, because when we pray to God, we're talking to God. And when we're meditating, we're listening. And if we're in a conversation with God, we talk, but then we have to stop and listen for what God has to say back to us. And he does answer us. Sometimes it's immediately, sometimes it'll take a day or a week or a month, but I can guarantee you that if you do two-way prayer with God every morning, the answers will come.
Mom Bear, what's the most difficult amends you've had to make?
Sorry.
What is the most difficult amends you've had to make?
Okay. I'm Cleo. I'm an alcoholic. I guess the first one that comes to mind is like the scariest amends that I've had to make. Before I got sober, I was in a really abusive relationship. And I would have told you before I got sober, and for years once I got sober, that it was just one-way abuse. It was just him physically abusing me, and that's not the case. I was also physically abusing him. I also smashed TVs, phones, laptops, threw a glass pie dish at his head. And the last altercation resulted in me going to the cops with bleeding from my nose. He had tried to impale me, and I went to the cops, and he ended up in prison and was in prison for a while. And I was haunted by fear of him for years. Like, I would just Google his name and see like if he was out of prison or whatnot. I found through doing that like after he had gotten out of prison, he had hurt another woman to the point that she ended up in the hospital with her jaw wired shut, and he had gone back into prison. And this is like the not editing my 8-step list. Like, he was on my inventory. He ended up on my 8-step list. I was really clear that I had done a lot of harm to him, regardless of the harm that he had done to me. But I was really scared. Like, I was scared that he might physically hurt me. But it just, I couldn't get fully free, you know, with that fear that if he got out of prison, he might come find me and try to hurt me. And that, you know, and even the sending him to prison, I had lied to the cops about the extent of what had gone on. And so I started trying to find him in prison. And I couldn't. And I ended up making another amends. And that person asked me, he said that he had heard stuff had gone south with this man and I, and did I know that he was out of prison, or I don't know how it got there, but I said, no, I didn't. I've actually been trying to locate him, and I can't. And he said, well, I'm not in contact with him, but our friend Sarah, who is another person that was on my 8-step list that I hadn't been able to locate because I didn't remember her last name, and her daughter was also on my 8-step list, because I had watched her as an infant, you know, while I was out of my mind, and forgotten that I was watching her on multiple occasions. And he was like, I don't know if he'll be there, but Sarah, this woman, died, and her memorial is tomorrow. I was in California. I'm from California. I was in California on an amends trip. Had this conversation. She had just died. The memorial was tomorrow. He got me the information for the memorial, and he said, I don't know, but there's a chance that this guy might be there. And I was so scared. Jack was with me. I mean, like, we went to this park. I was like vibrating, just like shaking, just praying constantly. And went into that memorial, and he was there. And I was able to sit down across from him at a picnic table while he was rolling a joint, and acknowledge the harm that I had caused. And he sat across from me and apologized also, you know, and forgave me. And the weight that was lifted in doing that was tremendous, as a result of just the willingness to like go there through the fear, which, like, just to give you an idea of where my mind goes, like, the guy that I had made amends to the day before was also somebody I'd called the cops on, so you get a picture of how I am when I'm drinking. But I had this idea in my head that they were ganging up on me, and like he was going to tell the guy that I was going to be there, and he was going to show up with a gun and kill me. Like, that was the amount of fear that I was walking through. But it was just clear to me, regardless of what anybody else said, that like the amends needed to be made, and I'm really glad I made it. And I got to talk to the young woman that, I mean, she was now a young woman, but the baby that I, you know, mistreated. She didn't remember me at all, and I had the conversation of what that amends would look like with my sponsor, but we'd also come to, you know, to just ask her if she remembered me, and if she didn't remember me, that wasn't harm that I was going to then introduce into her life if she didn't know about it. And I was able to pay respects to the woman, and another guy that I was on my 8-step list that I hadn't been able to find was also there. So that was one of the most powerful and scary and hard amends that I've made. And it also took me years to get there. I will just say, you know, that was not in my first, like, it took me years to get there. That was like 2 years ago, and I'm 6 years sober.
Just got to read a question. That's it. and I was sitting on the phone with Chris in the parking lot. Okay. Why is it wrong to think of self? Question mark. And I'm going to ask the second question, and we can try to clarify it together as a team. So it says, why is it wrong to think of self? And then it says, and why do you have to say amends if it was clearly you who was not wrong? Pass it down. Whoever wants to start, go ahead, buddy.
I don't know. Whew. Of course it's not wrong to think of self. Like, we have to keep ourselves alive. I mean, God gave us all these gifts, all these instincts. It's not wrong to think of self. We just weren't very responsible with that big, job. And why do you have to say amends if it was clearly you who was not wrong? I don't think there's any amends. If you didn't do a harm, there's no harm that you can confess. So, but I also know that sometimes there's strained relations in our lives where I maybe haven't done anything, like I can't name the harm done, and my willingness to approach that person. Because sometimes I don't know what I've done. When Cleo was talking, I'm like, I can't follow that amends with, after you were done, I was like, I got nothing on that. My amends have been not easy, but I had to make amends to my children for stuff I didn't even know I did. I never drank. My kids were born when I was sober, and I was a selfish, dry mother for many years, going to AA and just being selfish and trampling all over their rights. And I couldn't see it. And so when I give them the opportunity, which I still give them the opportunity to bring stuff up, please bring stuff up. Both of my children are in recovery, and I want to be the example of how to keep that open. So sometimes I don't know what I've done. I don't, it doesn't take me to be drunk to do something objectionable. And, and if you object to my behavior, sometimes I don't even know. So please tell me, and, we can try to work it out. That's all I could say to that. You got anything on that? Anybody?
Go.
I'm Sandy in Al-Anon.
Sandy.
And my one sponsor said, Sandy, even if you have 1% part of the problem, you're part of the problem. Which really helped me a lot because, of course, I didn't think I did anything wrong, but I could accept the fact that maybe I had 1% part of the problem. So the other thing I was thinking about, though, the idea of amends, and I grew up in an alcoholic home. My father was the alcoholic, and he died when I was 16. He unfortunately hemorrhaged to death in a hotel from the effects of alcoholism and left my mother with 4 kids. I was the oldest of the 4 of them. And I really never had a good relationship with my mother either. Why didn't she stop all the chaos that was going on? I don't know. We just never, ever had a good relationship, and my younger sister was her favorite, so that didn't make life any better. But anyway, so then I come to Al-Anon and all this recovery stuff and trying to figure out why I'm screwed up. And I heard this one speaker talk about her relationship with her estranged mother and how difficult it was and how to make a living amends. And I thought, well, I had to get rid of my anger and resentment. So I decided, well, I guess I'm going to have to be a kind and loving daughter whether I want to or not. So every Friday, just about every Friday, I would go spend time with my mother, and we'd watch basketball or football, which she loved sports. And what was amazing, by the time she passed away, even before that was the first time she ever told me she loved me. And by the time she passed away, we were fine. I loved her. She loved me. There was nothing we needed to say, and I was at peace. So just wanted to say that. Thanks for listening.
I just wanted to add about thinking about ourselves. I believe that we're modern day disciples of God. I believe that we are put on this earth to serve Him. We are His hands and His eyes and His ears. And that's why we're to think of others. God will take care of us. We don't need to think about ourselves and obsess about ourselves. We need to do God's work, and God will take care of the rest. And the second part of that question, is even a pancake has two sides. So I would encourage someone to just walk it backwards with your sponsor until you figure out where you got the ball rolling.
I'm brand new in that pancake thing. It's one of the things that drives me nuts. Can you explain a little more? Can you repeat the question?
Into the microphone. Can you repeat the question into the mic?
Oh, the pancake having two sides.
The pancake having two sides? Well, even if something is like 99% someone else's fault and 1% your fault, it still has two sides. They may see it from one way and we see it from a different angle.
I love pancakes. I just wanted to add that I think that's why the 12 steps provides that relief for those people that do live in your head and think, well, why do I have to say anything to them? They did this. It's always that line that I've heard at the conference that it's not them. It's something you have to look inside yourself, and what better way to do that than through this program. So thanks.
I'm Cleo. I'm an alcoholic. I know we're spending a lot of time on this question, but I'm being moved to answer it as well. For me, it's like my default is to constantly think of self. So I need to try for constant thought of others. There's still a lot of self-thoughts that come in, and it doesn't make me wrong. It makes me human. And then I don't know who wrote this card. I'm just going to share the truth of my experience and the energy that I feel from this card. Just the not being written in all caps and underlined. It was clearly you who was not wrong. It feels like there's some resentment in this card. And for me, it's like if I'm writing resentment inventory on someone that I feel has harmed me, and I have many examples of people that have done more harm to me than I've done to them, but if I can find selfishness, dishonesty, fear, like that has been driving me and how I've related to them, there's been harm that's been done. And if I want to get free, it doesn't matter what the other person has done. And I've gone in just like one brief example of I had this guy that I went to high school with that molested me at a party in high school, and he was on my resentment inventory, and there were some other minor harms that I did to him, but I went and made amends to him, didn't mention that, and at the end of the amends, he brought that up and apologized to me and wanted to have a conversation from that, and that would never have happened, and there was no way for me to get free of the resentment without going and acknowledging the harm that I had done.
Hey, Dane, alcoholic. Yeah, that first question, why is it wrong to think of self? There's been some great stuff shared about that. As Cleo said, that's my default, to automatically go to me. There's absolutely no God in that. And on a mechanical sense, it's kind of preaching to the choir. If we say, we've got some disciplines for that, on upon awakening, we ask God, to divorce our thinking, from self-pity, dishonest, and self-seeking motives. That's all involved me. And it's always been about me. And it can be about me today. It can be about me. I want to get off from this panel and go over to get a cup of coffee and, passively cut in front of somebody, who might need that cup of coffee for, more than me. But, there's another side of it too. When we say wrong to think about self, I think there's some areas, that we talk about, that's been in religious practice for centuries, and that's self-examination. And that's one of the things that we have an opportunity to do here, and we learn the ways to do that. So we can take an honest look at ourselves and share that with another man and also with God at the same time. And that's about what I got on that. Thanks.
You guys are awesome. All right, I'm going to go with this one. And, okay. In AA, you hear a lot of people describe things they do or things other people do as untreated alcoholism. So you'll hear people referring to stuff other people are doing and say they're untreated. And the question is, but is it really? And I think from it seems like a place of, do we have the right to judge that? Do we really know that? Is it really untreated alcoholism? I don't know if anybody wants to answer that, but the question's been asked.
I think judging, is all part of that humanness that we all have, and the individual who says, I'm not judging you, is already judged you to say, I haven't, I'm not judging you. But, the bottom line is we're keepers for sure. But we also have a level of compassion. And we also know what love is, because God is love. And I believe everybody sitting in this room, God has entered their lives in a miraculous way and opened up their heart, or we want to be here. We want to be feeling what we're feeling this weekend, and gosh, where was I going with this? Totally blanked out. Yeah, let me have that question again.
In AA, you hear a lot of people describe things they see or things they see other people doing or saying as untreated alcoholism. But is it really?
We get intimate with people. We're in their environment, we go to meetings, we get to know them. We get to know their attitudes, their behaviors, what they're physically looking like, body language, speaks an awful lot. And we can spot this in others, and others can spot that with us. We talked about earlier in this panel, about spiritual consent, and what is that? That's an agreement between two people, that I've practiced. This is one facet of spiritual consent that, you can call somebody on their crap and then give them bullet points on their crap, and the only thing that they can say is thank you. But, we get people, that are untreated alcoholics, and I myself have been one. We have an energy, that level of restlessness, that discontentment, nothing is just going right. And, we are just absolutely off. And I believe I have a responsibility with love and compassion to bring that to the table, and ask somebody, what's going on with you? And I mean, really with a love and interest, how are you doing? Let's sit and talk about this, because I care about you. And, man, that's a far cry from where I came from anyway, because I couldn't give a flip about anybody a number of years ago. And that's not the case today.
I'll take a stab. Suzanne, alcoholic. I also was in untreated alcoholism for a long time. Going to meetings, lots and lots of meetings. And I believe the only time I really use that term is when I have a resentment against somebody that identifies as an alcoholic that I know is not practicing a spiritual program of recovery. And only with my sponsor. I don't, walk around saying, oh, that person's in untreated alcoholism. Or it's more of like a, I don't know, it's more of like a... when I look around meetings today, I'm just grateful everyone is in their seat. And, I don't like everybody in that room, but I'm like, that person needs to be in that seat. Like, I needed to be in that seat. And I got to have love and tolerance for that person, even though I don't like them. And even though they're not willing to do anything, maybe tomorrow they will be. So, I carry a message of a spiritual program of recovery. And when that person hears it, like when I heard it, I was a few years away from a drink when I heard it. And so I never know when someone's going to hear that message. And thank you.
Another question or keep going? One more question.
Go ahead.
I can't, not gonna do it. It's the last one. I'm not gonna. I'll read the question and then I'm gonna read another one. You get to pick which one you want to answer. The one I was laughing at is, what is the most disturbing thing you've ever seen in a meeting?
Oh my gosh, I have such a good answer. But
Go ahead.
No, I won't. It's not even.
Okay, the next one is, how do you cope with persistent / ongoing anger? Parentheses, if inventory isn't helping. How do you cope with persistent or ongoing anger with the caveat, if inventory isn't helping? So you can't just say write a 4-step.
I think I kind of answered that in how I talked about the previous one. I mean, for me, it's like sometimes I've got to look at my stuff in the inventory and then I got to go have a conversation with the person and own up to my stuff.
Please answer the first one.
I will answer it for you after. It's just not like I don't think it's very constructive, but I'm happy to tell you the story later if you would like.
You want that one, Rhonda, or you want the next one? We got one more. We got time for one more.
I forgot the one I was going to answer.
It was how to deal with persistence.
I would consider doing inventory with a second person and a third person until you dig deep enough. I've done multiple inventories where I went to the first person and they uncovered something, and the second person dug a little bit deeper, and the third person hit home. So I would suggest talking to different people and hearing that inventory heard multiple times.
I'll just add one other thing I'll throw out there is go try to help somebody else instead of trying to get out of your own resentment more.
Great job, everybody. Thanks, everybody, for being here. Awesome. Mr. Stewart?